Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story you think fake, a name synonymous with horror, a gaze that turns flesh to stone, Medusa. But what if I told you the monster you picture was once a victim? A beautiful priestess, whose tragic fate was a cruel twist of divine injustice, not a consequence of her own malice. Forget the statue. Let's peel back the layers of myth to reveal a raw, heart-wrenching truth buried for millennia. Prepare to question everything you've learned about this infamous figure, because the real story of Medusa is far more agonizing, far more human, and far more terrifying than any monster tale. In ancient Athens, where marble gleamed under the Aegean sun and wisdom flowed like nectar from the gods, lived a maiden of unparalleled beauty. Not the serpentine horror of legend, but a mortal woman, her hair like spun midnight, her eyes deep pools of sapphire, her skin luminous as polished ivory. She was so breathtaking, some whispered. Even the goddesses themselves might envy her. But Medusa harbored no vanity. Her heart was pure, her spirit unblemished. She dedicated her life to Athena, the virgin goddess of wisdom, war, and crafts within the sacred, hallowed walls of Athena's temple. Medusa served. Her days were a tapestry woven with devotion, prayers whispered, altars tended, sacred rites observed. Her vow of chastity, a sacred covenant, was a testament to her unwavering faith, a shield against worldly desires that might stain her purity. This temple, a sanctuary of divine power, was her refuge, her purpose. Her entire world, she moved through its echoing halls with quiet grace, her very presence a living testament to the goddess she adored. Every flicker of incense, every polished offering, every moment of silent contemplation cemented her bond with Athena. She believed, truly believed, that her piety would secure her peace, her virtue, her protection. Little did she know, the very sanctity she embraced would become the stage for her undoing. But beauty, even when cloaked in piety, can draw unwanted attention. Poseidon the earth-shaker, lord of the roaring seas, was a deity known for his boundless appetites. His tempestuous passions he saw Medusa, not as a devout priestess, but as an object of desire, a prize to be claimed. His desire, a relentless tide, began to swell, threatening to engulf her serene existence. He watched, he waited, his divine patience thinly veiled, a predator circling its unsuspecting prey. The sacred vows, the temple's sanctity, fate to Poseidon. These were but minor inconveniences, obstacles to be swept away by the sheer force of his will. A storm was brewing, unseen by mortal eyes, but felt in the subtle shift of the sea breeze, in the heavy air that pressed down. The tranquility Medusa cherished was brittle, poised to shatter. One fateful night, the world seemed to hold its breath. The moon, a silver sickle in the ink-black sky, cast long, distorted shadows across the temple's marble floor. Medusa, lost in the quiet reverence of her nightly duties, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. A tremor, subtle at first, the air grew heavy, thick with the scent of brine and ozone, the unmistakable essence of the sea god. Poseidon, a force of nature, personified, burst forth from the depths, his form colossal, his eyes burning with an unholy fire. He had no respect for the sacred ground, no regard for Athena's domain, no pity for the innocent priestess. The sanctuary, a bastion of purity, was desecrated, violently torn asunder by a god's insatiable lust. Medusa, trapped, helpless, became a pawn in a cosmic power play, her screams swallowed by the echoing walls, her pleas lost to the storm of divine aggression. The very altar, where she had offered countless prayers, bore witness to her undoing. The sacred flame flickered, then dimmed, as if recoiling in horror from the egregious act. This was not a clash of titans, but a brutal assertion of power over innocence, a profound violation that rent the fabric of divine order. The earth itself seemed to groan, a silent lament, for the profound sacrilege committed within hallowed walls. Her purity, her devotion, her very being fey, all were shattered in that horrifying moment, leaving behind only the shards of a broken spirit. The weight of what transpired was immeasurable. It was a wound that would never heal, a scar etched not just on her body, but on her very soul. The gods who watched from Olympus remained silent. Athena, her patron goddess, was conspicuous. The silence was deafening, a damning indictment of divine indifference, a chilling precedent set for the suffering of mortals at the whims of the powerful Medusa. Once a beacon of grace, was now merely a vessel of profound trauma, her sanctity irrevocably defiled, her future shrouded in an impenetrable veil of despair. The sanctity of the temple was not merely breached, it was obliterated. The air, once perfumed with incense and devotion, now reeked of transgression and despair. Medusa, who had found solace and purpose within these walls, was now imprisoned by the memory of its defilement. The echoes of that night would forever reverberate within her, a constant, agonizing reminder of the moment her world crumbled. And the perpetrator, a god, remained untouched, his divine prerogative serving as a shield against consequences. It was a stark, brutal lesson in the hierarchy of power, where the innocent often bear the heaviest burdens, and justice, a concept often lauded by the gods, remained an elusive dream for mortals. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of nascent hope, Medusa lay broken, shattered, her spirit an open wound. She looked up at the statue of Athena, her goddess, her protector, her heart a maelstrom of agony and desperate plea. Why? She must have whispered, "Why me? Where were you?" Her innocence had been stolen, her sacred vow desecrated, and yet the perpetrator remained unpunished, perhaps even lauded in the divine courts for his sheer dominance. She yearned for solace, for retribution, for the righteous wrath of the goddess to fall upon her aggressor. But the gods, as often happens, had a different form of justice in mind, one steeped in irony and chilling cruelty. Athena descended, not in a comforting embrace, but in a tempest of icy fury, her divine presence crackling with indignation. Her gaze, usually a beacon of wisdom, was now a searing inferno of wrath. But it was not directed at the sea god, not at the perpetrator who had violated her sacred space, her priestess. Number her formidable fury fell squarely upon Athena's voice thundered, echoing through the now desecrated temple, a sound that pierced Medusa's soul more deeply than any physical wound. You have defiled my sanctuary, your presence, your very being, now a stain upon my sacred ground. The irony was a bitter, poisonous draught. Medusa, still reeling from one act of violence, was now subjected to another, far more insidious. She might have cried, her voice trembling, her pleas desperate and unheard. He forced himself upon me. He desecrated your temple. Not I, but Athena. In her cold, unyielding judgment, saw only the outcome, not the cause. The sacred space had been tainted, and Medusa, the one tainted, must bear the punishment. It was a swift, brutal judgment, a chilling testament to the often capricious nature of divine power, where optics often trumped truth, and the innocent often became scapegoats for the powerful, with a gesture that spoke of absolute power and terrifying finality. Athena pronounced her curse. Your beauty, that which attracted such unwelcome attention, shall be your undoing. Your hair, once a cascade of midnight silk, shall transform into writhing, venomous serpents. Medusa felt an agonizing transformation begin, a monstrous metamorphosis that ripped through her very essence. Her scalp prickled, then burned, as each strand of hair twisted, thickened, and writhed, transforming into hissing, venomous vipers. The pain was excruciating, not just physical, but an existential agony, as her very identity was stripped away. But the horror did not end there. Athena continued, her voice devoid of compassion. And your eyes, once pools of captivating sapphire, shall now be weapons of terror. Any mortal who gazes upon them shall be turned to stone. Medusa's vision blurred, then sharpened. She looked at her reflection in a polished shield, a horrified gasp catching in her throat. The beautiful woman she knew was gone, replaced by a grotesque, reptilian horror. Her skin, once luminous, now scaled her teeth. Sharpened fangs, her once captivating eyes, now glowing with an infernal light, promised instant death. The world spun. She was no longer. She was a monster, a Gorgon, cursed to be an instrument of fear and death, a living embodiment of the ultimate irony. Her suffering, her violation, was amplified 1,000-fold. The goddess, who should have protected her, had instead condemned her to a fate worse than death. It was a cruel, poetic justice, one that shifted the blame from the powerful aggressor to the helpless victim, turning her into a cautionary tale, a grotesque monument to divine indifference and the bitter sting of injustice. Her once radiant beauty, which was never her fault, became her eternal prison, a literal petrifying curse that would define her monstrous legacy for all time. The transformation was complete, but the torment had only just begun. Medusa's first reaction was a guttural scream of pure, unadulterated horror, a sound that ripped from her throat, raw and agonizing. She felt the slithering, cold coils of serpents where her soft hair once lay, heard their incessant, chilling hiss. Her once gentle features were now contorted into a mask of grotesque fury, a permanent grimace of despair. She was a living paradox, a being of immense power, yet utterly powerless over her own fate, cast out not just from the temple, but from humanity itself. Medusa became an outcast. The bustling streets of Athens, the familiar faces of her fellow priestesses, the comforting her existence was no longer one of service and devotion, but of solitary terror. She was banished to the desolate, wind-swept shores of the furthest lands, a place beyond the reach of civilization, a forgotten corner of the world where only the echoes of the waves and the cries of the gulls would be her companions. It was a sentence of eternal solitude, a living death. The burden of her curse was immediate, and every glance, every accidental flicker of her eyes carried the weight of instant death. Imagine the agony, a creature yearning for connection, for solace, yet condemned to destroy anyone who dared to meet her gaze. The first accidental petrifications must have been unbearable. A curious bird, a misguided traveler, perhaps even her own reflection in a pool of water, each encounter would have been a horrifying confirmation of her new, monstrous reality. Each lifeless statue, a monument to her unwilling power, a testament to her profound isolation. These weren't victims of malice. They were collateral damage in a divine vendetta, silent screams frozen in time, forever haunting her desolate lair. Her once vibrant spirit, already fractured by Poseidon's brutality, was now utterly crushed under the weight of Athena's vengeful curse. She became a prisoner within her own monstrous form, her heart a desolate wasteland of grief and self-loathing. The world, once a place of beauty and purpose, was now a constant threat, a landscape filled with potential victims. She longed for death, for an end to the unending torment, but even that solace was denied. She was destined to exist, a horrifying spectacle, a perpetual reminder of divine injustice, living in a desolate cave, surrounded by the stone figures of those who had dared to cross her path, or merely stumbled into her cursed existence. Each statue, a silent scream, each hissing serpent, a whisper of her eternal despair. She was a monster, not by choice, but by a cruel twist of fate, a victim transformed into a symbol of terror, her very existence a tragic poem of suffering. Her lair became her prison, a gaping maw in the earth, far from the sun, drenched lands of mortals. Within its echoing darkness, Medusa dwelled, a grotesque queen in a kingdom of stone. The walls dripped with moisture, the air thick with the scent of ancient rock and despair. But it was not merely a cave. It was a mausoleum of broken lives, a chilling gallery of accidental victims. Statues of men, women, and beasts stood frozen mid-stride, mid-cry, mid-gasp, fey eternal witnesses to her curse. A hunter, sword half-drawn, a curious traveler, face etched with sudden comprehension, a lost child, forever reaching. Each a silent scream, each a poignant reminder of the power she never asked for, the destruction she never willed. Imagine the torment, to be surrounded by the lifeless forms of those you inadvertently destroyed, their petrified eyes forever fixed on you. These were not trophies of conquest for Medusa. They were monuments to her ceaseless suffering, a daily, hourly reminder of the monster she had become. The constant, chilling hiss of the serpents upon her head was a perverse lullaby, a sound that underscored her solitude and amplified her despair. She didn't seek out victims. They stumbled into her cursed domain, drawn by misfortune or foolish bravado, only to be caught in the web of a fate not of her making. She was a spectre of tragedy, not a harbinger of evil. Her fangs were not for biting in malice, but a cruel facet of her transformation. Her gaze not a weapon of choice, but an unavoidable extension of her cursed being. The fear she inspired was a reflection of her own internal terror, her overwhelming grief at what she had lost. She was Medusa, a beautiful maiden trapped within a horrifying shell, her heart still beating with the echoes of a stolen life, yet her external form broadcasting only death and despair. This was her existence, a perpetual nightmare, an unceasing vigil in a tomb of her own making, waiting for an end that seemed impossibly distant, yearning for the peace that only true annihilation could bring. The very air within her lair hummed with a sorrow so profound it clung to the stone, making the shadows seem deeper, the silence more oppressive. This was not the lair of a villain reveling in power, but the solitary confinement of a soul unjustly condemned. Every petrified face was a mirror reflecting her own shattered identity, every cold, unblinking eye a stark reminder of the inescapable horror of her existence. She was Medusa, not the monstrous terror of ancient tales, but a tragic figure, a victim of divine cruelty, forced to wield a power that brought her only unending pain and an isolation that was absolute. This was her plight, a chilling testament to how easily a life of grace can be twisted into a legacy of fear, all at the whim of the gods. But the tragedy of Medusa was far from its... In the distant land of Seriphos, a young man named Perseus, son of Zeus, found himself entangled in a perilous web of fate, not out of a burning desire to slay a monster for the sake of humanity, but compelled by a cruel twist of mortal ambition and divine decree. Polydex, the island king, coveted Perseus's mother, Dana Faye. To rid himself of the burgeoning hero, he cunningly challenged Perseus to bring him the head of Medusa, a feat he believed impossible, a suicide mission designed to remove a rival. Perseus, a mortal caught in the capricious currents of divine and royal machinations, had no personal quarrel with Medusa. He knew her only by the whispers of legend, a formidable Gorgon, a symbol of terror. He was driven by a sense of duty, a desire to prove himself, and perhaps a desperate attempt to protect his mother. His quest was not born of righteous vengeance against Medusa, but out of a need to fulfill a king's audacious demand, a mandate that would seal the fate of the already tormented priestess. He was a hero, in training unknowingly marching towards an act that would immortalize him and condemn Medusa to it. The gods, ever meddling in mortal affairs, saw an opportunity. Athena, still smarting from the defilement of her temple, and perhaps seeking to erase the living testament to her own harsh judgment, offered aid. Hermes, the swift messenger, also lent his support. This was not a hero facing pure evil, but a divine conspiracy, a predetermined slaughter of an already suffering victim. Perseus was gifted with divine tools, a highly polished bronze shield from Athena, a curved adamantine sword from Hermes, winged sandals, and Hades' helm of invisibility. These were not the instruments of a fair fight, but the tools for an execution meticulously designed to bypass Medusa's terrible power. He journeyed across vast oceans, soared over treacherous lands guided by the god's will, his path inexorably leading him to the desolate island where Medusa endured her wretched existence. He was a weapon, honed and directed, unknowingly an agent of further cruelty. The world saw him as a hero, a valiant slayer of monsters. But for Medusa, he was merely the final, inevitable act in a prolonged drama of suffering, the last cruel twist of the knife in a wound that would never heal. His arrival was not a rescue, but the ultimate punishment, the final, agonizing chapter in a story that began with beauty, was marred by brutal violation and would end in a bloody, unceremonious death. But while legends would paint Perseus as the valiant hero, the truth was far more somber. He was a pawn, just as Medusa had been a pawn, manipulated by forces far greater than himself. His courage was undeniable, but his mission was ultimately a divine errand of obliteration, a final extinguishing of a life that had been cursed into an unholy, perpetual torment. The hero was coming, not to save, but to silence, to complete the transformation of a victim into a legend of pure monstrousness, forever erasing the pain, the injustice, the human tragedy that lay beneath the serpentine horror. Perseus, armed with the gods' formidable gifts, finally arrived at the desolate, rock-strewn shores that cradled Medusa's accursed lair. The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable dread, a profound stillness broken only by the mournful sigh of the sea and the faint, unsettling hiss that emanated from the cavern's maw. He donned Hades' helm, rendering him invisible, a ghost moving through the shadows. His winged sandals carried him silently, stealthily, deeper into the suffocating darkness of the Gorgon's domain. This was not a clash of equals, a hero facing a fearsome beast in open combat. This was an execution, planned and orchestrated, against a creature already broken, already defeated by fate. Within the cavern, the scene was one of morbid stillness. The petrified figures, frozen in their final moments of terror, bore silent witness to the unending tragedy. Medusa lay in repose, not in peaceful slumber, but in the heavy, restless sleep of utter exhaustion and despair. Her monstrous form, the writhing serpents, the scaled skin, the fangs fey, these were her prison. Not her identity. She was not plotting malevolence. She was merely existing. A shell of her former self, perhaps even dreaming of the day when release would finally come. The very notion of her actively menacing Perseus seems a cruel embellishment. For her existence was already a living death, her spirit already crushed. Perseus approached, guided by Athena, who had explicitly advised him not to look directly at Medusa, but to use the polished shield as a mirror. A true combatant would face his foe, a divine executioner would employ every possible... He saw her reflection, not the direct, petrifying horror, but a distorted image, a monster in repose, vulnerable, unaware. There was no growl of defiance from Medusa, no roar of challenge, only the rhythmic hiss of her serpentine hair, a sound that spoke of perpetual unease, not aggression. With a sudden decisive motion, guided by the gods, Perseus raised the blade, honed by divine smiths, flashed once in the dim light, a swift arc of silver against the cavern's gloom. Medusa's head was severed from her neck in a single, brutal stroke. Her life, already a prolonged agony, ended abruptly, without a cry, without a struggle. It was a silent, clinical act, not a glorious triumph over a rampaging beast, but the final, tragic chapter for a victim who had known nothing but suffering and injustice since her beauty had first caught a god's eye from her severed neck. In a shocking, almost miraculous birth, sprang forth Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the giant with the golden sword. These were the offspring of her union with Poseidon, conceived in violence, born in death. Even in her demise, Medusa was a vessel, her body giving rise to marvels that served to glorify others, never herself. Her blood, too, possessed a dual nature. From one side, a deadly poison, from the other, a miraculous cure, a final, poignant metaphor for her existence, fey both monstrous and tragically beautiful, capable of death and life, but never on her own terms. Her head, still potent with its petrifying gaze, was promptly bagged by Perseus, a trophy, a weapon, a testament to his heroism, and a permanent symbol of Medusa's transformation from victim to monster in the annals of myth. The silence that followed her death was not one of triumph, but of profound, echoing tragedy, a final, brutal silencing of a voice that had long cried out for justice in vain. Perseus, his mission accomplished, did not cast Medusa's head aside. Instead, it became his ultimate weapon, a portable instrument of petrification, a chilling testament to her enduring power, even in death. He used it against Polydectes and his followers, freezing them into lifelike statues, bringing a final, brutal justice to his stepfather's treacherous court. Even after its practical uses, Athena claimed the head, affixing it to her Aegis shield, a fearsome emblem of protection and power, effectively turning Medusa into a permanent, monstrous symbol, eternally serving the goddess who had so cruelly... Thus, Medusa's legacy was cemented, not as the victim of a brutal assault and a god's unjust wrath, but as the quintessential monster, the terrifying Gorgon whose gaze meant certain doom. Her story was simplified, sanitized, stripped of its agonizing context. The nuances of her suffering, the profound injustice of her transformation, were buried under layers of heroic... She became the villain, the symbol of terror to be overcome, the obstacle for a hero's triumph. Her pain, her lost innocence, her forced solitude, all were erased, leaving only the monstrous image. For millennia, this simplified version persisted. The narrative favored the hero, celebrated the god's justice, and demonized the victim. It's a stark reminder of how history and myth can be written by the powerful, silencing the voices of the oppressed, twisting their suffering into a justification for their demise. Medusa's tale is not just a myth. It's a chilling parable about blame, power, and the devastating consequences of divine cruelty. A timeless echo of victim blaming, where the innocent bear the burdens of another's transgression, transformed into an enduring symbol of monstrousness, forever robbing her of her true, tragic humanity. So, the next time you see the image of Medusa, those writhing serpents, that petrifying gaze, remember the real story. Remember the beautiful priestess, the innocent victim whose life was shattered by a god's lust, and then mercilessly redefined by another goddess's wrath. Remember that the monster we've been taught to fear was, in truth, a creature of profound sorrow, a testament to divine injustice, a poignant symbol of how easily a victim can be transformed into a villain in the annals of history. Her story challenges us to look beyond the surface, to question the narratives handed down through time, and to seek the truth hidden beneath layers of legend. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about power, accountability, and the often brutal nature of justice, especially when wielded by those in authority. Medusa's story is a cry from the depths, an eternal lament for a stolen life, a distorted legacy, and an injustice that reverberates through the ages. She was not born a monster, she was fey-made Fey-One, an enduring tragic figure whose true horror lies not in her gaze, but in the injustice of her fate. That is all for today's deep dive into the real story of Medusa. If this narrative resonated with you, if it sparked a new perspective, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with those who might also be interested in uncovering the hidden truths. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time for another journey into the heart of mythology.